With the Switch 2 as well as Mario Kart World finally rolling around, everyone is wanting to figure out what the best track in the game is. And while some creators have made some questionable rankings,
1. Boo Cinema.
I'm gonna take on the ranking myself, because I know my opinion is factually correct. Quick disclaimer, some of the tracks that show up twice in the Grand Prix, like Peach Stadium and Crown City, will be mentioned twice in this video. With all that mentioned, let's get into the first track. Number 32, Peach Stadium Shell Cup. Were you really expecting something else? I mean, look at that minimap. That says it all. This is so boring to drive on, it's insane. And it's honestly a really poor representation of Peach Stadium, because the other version in the Special Cup is way better in my opinion, and you're gonna see that later. Number 31, Crown City Shell Cup. The Shell Cup is probably the worst cup to begin with in Mario Kart World, and these two tracks are probably the reason because of it. Now there are some interesting set pieces in the track, like the skate park, but most of the assets used in this track are also used in the intermissions, which makes it feel like one. And honestly, Crown City could have been an amazing track if they followed the routes of Coconut Mall, where you actually drive into the place of the city. But instead of that, we drive around the city, which leads to a lot of boring straight roads, like I said. Number 30, Desert Hills. Why they brought that Desert Hills instead of the other desert tracks from the Mario Kart series is kind of shocking to me. Desert Hills has always been one of the more boring tracks in the series, and they already brought it back for Mario Kart Wii. And I honestly thought they would bring back the desert track from Mario Kart Wii with the pyramids and such. That doesn't mean the track necessarily has to be bad though. I mean, retro tracks can be reimagined to be a lot better than the original ever was. That does not apply to Desert Hills though. I'm willing to argue that the theming is even more boring in this version than the actual DS version. And while I do think the layout is somewhat better in this version than the DS version, I just don't think it's interesting enough to land in any other place than the 30th place. Number 29, Crown City Mushroom Cup. While I do think this layout is better than the Shell Cup variation, I do think this theming of Crown City is still pretty bad and it drags it down a lot. And that may be due to all the city tracks we got in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but still, this track isn't anything too noteworthy to me. The only part of the track that is somewhat interesting is the part with the solar panels, but still, we've got a way better rendition of that even in this game. Number 28, Koopa Troopa Beach. Being a SNES track, you would expect it to be a little more on the simpler side, which it is, but the turns still feel really great. But in the end, the track is just a circle, a flat circle at that. And while I do like the theming and the upgrade this track got, I can't put this track any higher than this. Number 27, Moo Moo Meadows. Now, I do like this track, trust me, I do. But the fact that we already have this in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and now Mario Kart World just feels too much for me, man. Like, they could have remade Moo Moo Farm and I would have been happy. But this just feels too early. And the changes to this track aren't substantial enough to land it any higher than this. Number 26, Mario Circuit. While I do think combining all the Mario circuits into one track is interesting, if you're going to do that, include Mario Circuit 4. And still, with the whole concept being this, I still don't think this track is particularly interesting. There's no elevation changes, it's just a flat track. And while the turns are fun and interesting, I don't think the theming and all of that is particularly well designed and stuff. And also, this track doesn't use any of the rail grinding or wall grinding mechanics, which, being the whole gimmick of Mario Kart World, it's a bit strange. Number 25, Dandelion Depths. While I do think this theme is interesting, being based off the Wooded Kingdom from Super Mario Odyssey, this track is just forgettable somehow. Like if I would write down a list and write out every single track from Mario Kart World, this track is probably one of the last ones that I would write down. It's not necessarily to say the track is bad, it's just underwhelming. The big money shot of this track is probably going to be the lake, the bright lake, but it's probably just a bit too bright for me to remember it. Like you can't see much of the track in here, which overall leads to the track being fairly forgettable. Number 24, Boo Cinema. Wait, hold on, put down your pitchforks and hear me out right here. I do think the theming for this track is incredibly interesting. With the whole vintage cinematic style, this is probably the most interesting ghost track we have gotten in the entire series. But it hurts that the layout is so underwhelming for this track. Well, I'm probably exaggerating a bit there, it's not so bad, it's just boring. And it results in this track not being as good as it would have been if it had like a better layout. If it had a better layout, this could have easily been top 10. But the layout is just so boring that I have to put this track on in this placement. Number 23, Faraway Oasis. Here we have another track with an amazing idea about the terrible layout. Join the club of Boo Cinema, buddy. Again, this track has such a good theme, with it being like a zoo theme with all the animals and such. They have all the animations for the animals, but they use it for the intermissions. Why? This track is just boring because of that. Like, why are all these animals in the background? We want to interact with these animals in the race itself. Like in Dino Dino Jungle, which we will come back to in a minute. That track is amazing. But Faraway Oasis just becomes a bit of a boring track, like this turn. This turn is just one giant U-turn, and there is nothing going on in here. Put down some animals, Nintendo, please. Number 22, Salty Salty Speedway. Here we have another track, alright, you get the joke right now. This track is especially unfortunate because this was one of the tracks I was so excited about. Especially when I saw this shortcut in the direct, I was sure I would like this track. But the water controls on this track in particular feel really off. Now, unlike most people, I don't mind the water controls that much, but on this track in particular, they just feel awful to drive around. Maybe it's the enclosed space in the canal, but still, despite the amazing theming, this track can't go any higher than this. Which still, I'm pretty bummed out about this because this could have been an amazing track. The visuals on this track really stand out in my opinion. Number 21, DK Spaceport. When I was originally making this list, I was going to place DK Spaceport way higher than this, but after further consideration, I thought that what made DK Spaceport good was not that good to begin with. The track is heavily characterized by the DK mech and the theming of the track, but the layout is pretty basic, and while I do like the amount of tricks you can do on this track, it's on the same level as Excite Bike Arena in its terms of fun. If you like tricking, you're gonna love this track, but it doesn't have as much substance as I would like it to have. Number 20, Starview Peak. Is anyone else disappointed by the track? No? Just me? I absolutely adore the concept of this track. Being that Mario Galaxy is one of my favorite games theming wise, I was sure I would love this track, but I'm sad to report that in terms of layout, this track is fairly forgettable. Aside from the water section which speeds you up, there isn't anything I distinctly remember for this track being great. And also, for a track being based around the Comet Observatory from Mario Galaxy, there isn't a lot of time spent in the Comet Observatory, which is really sad to see. Basically, just 5 seconds is spent into the Comet Observatory, which is, to me, the most interesting part of the track, and otherwise you drive around the track around these really basic turns. DK Pass. Nobody really asked for them to bring DK Pass back. I mean, there are much more interesting snow tracks in the Mario Kart series, but I do think the layout is pretty interesting on this one, especially this shortcut where you bounce off the pole. I really like that one. Still though, this track isn't anything exceptional, it's just good to drive through, and I will play this a couple more times, but it isn't exactly replayable as much as the tracks above this. Number 18, Mario Bros. Circuit. I'm honestly surprised I put this track so high, but this is just a track that I keep coming back to. The layout is interesting, especially for a starting course. The theming is interesting for a starting course, being that it goes for a more western theme instead of the usual grassy land from the usual Mario Circuit. And aside from this turn being a little boring, I do think this track is very replayable. So while Mario Circuit serves its purpose for teaching new players the new mechanics like wall riding and rail grinding, it also is very replayable for the experienced players to keep coming back to. Number 17, Peach Beach. I'm still pretty torn on how to feel about the changes on this track, because lap 2 and 3 offer more variety by taking a different path than lap 1. Lap 2 and 3 are way worse, to put it lightly. Lap 2 isn't too bad, but after this turn, it's just so boring. But I can still appreciate what they tried to do for Peach Beach, and I'm still putting it at this placement. Number 16, Cheep Cheep Falls. This is a really distinct theming for a Mario track that I'm honestly surprised they haven't tackled before. As for the layout, Cheep Cheep Falls has to be one of the toughest tracks in Mario Kart World. The water mechanics utilized in these tracks are really difficult, especially this last turn, which I find it really difficult to get around to without driving into the off-road. And you might say skill issue, which may be the case. I still think this track is really unique layout-wise. Only thing holding it back are the water controls, which most people consider it to be worse than normal controls. Number 15, Peach Stadium Special Cup. Being in the Special Cup, you would expect this to be a little more difficult than the Peach Stadium of the Shell Cup, which it obviously is, and that's not that hard to do. But is this track worthy of being on this spot? For me, yeah. While I don't think this track is particularly special in its layout, the tracks just feel really nice, and I always feel myself coming back to this track in particular. I don't know what makes this track so good for me, but this is just a place I feel like it belongs to. It's probably the lack of bullshit that can happen on this track. Like, you can get screwed over so much on any other track, but this track feels really fair for some reason. It's probably the lack of real grinding and wall grinding, which, being the main gimmick of Mario Kart World, it's sad to see them gone. But for one track that benefits because of their absence, I think it's good. Number 14, Whistletop Summit. This has to be the best Mushroom Cup track in the game, and I was debating on placing it higher, but in the end, I thought it was the best place for the track to be at. The main gimmick of this track is rails, and lots of rails. And while I like the rail grinding mechanic, and I like that this track specifically utilizes them to the fullest, this is like the only problem with this track. The turns feel too automated, to where you don't even have to drive if you're taking the fastest route on this track. Like you can see on this part of the track. Like, I'm only holding A and pressing the trick button, and to me that's not that interesting. Still though, this track feels very fun to drive on, and I can see myself coming back to this a lot. Number 13, Wario Shipyard. It's crazy how I'm placing Wario Shipyard, a track that most people think is very good, so low. And I'm not trying to say that Wario Shipyard is bad. It's just a testament of how good all of the tracks in Mario Kart World are from here. And the only thing that kind of ruins this track for me is, unfortunately, the water itself. The thing of Wario Shipyard was that it was a sunken ship in which you drive underwater. But Mario Kart World doesn't allow this, and there goes the whole point of Mario Shipyard. Still though, the track is very good, it just suffers from the engine in which Mario Kart World is based on. And honestly, it would have been better if it was brought back in another game where you could actually drive underwater. Number 12, Choco Mountain. First of all, how in God's name is this Choco Mountain? Like, you could have given it another name and nobody would have batted an eye. The first time I was driving this track, I was like, this isn't Choco Mountain, right? But the layout is completely the same as the original Choco Mountain. And this is what a retro track should be like. Choco Mountain on the N64, to be honest, was a bit of a basic track, and something that wasn't really that memorable to me. But this track goes for a completely different theming. And while the challenge of dodging the rocks is a bit removed on this track, I still think this is a massive glow up, and something the team should really strive towards with future retro tracks. Number 11, Toad's Factory. People have been asking for this track to come back a long time. And did it live up to the hype? For me, yes. There wasn't necessarily anything wrong with Toad's Factory, so bringing it back like it was originally is a good choice in my opinion. Opposed to Choco Mountain, where it completely reimagined it, Toad's Factory remains still pretty much like the original, while still giving you some place to wall ride and rail grind, which I think enhances the track. Overall, Toad's Factory is still a great track on the Wii, and it is as well on here in Mario Kart World. Number 10, Acorn Heights. While some of you may say that I have placed this track a bit too highly, I think the amount of varied paths in this track enhances the replayability of the track greatly. There are tons of places to wheel grind, there are a lot of space to use your mushrooms to great effect, and honestly, my only gripe with this track is that the gliding section feels a bit too boring. Like they could have placed a cannery or something, and it would improve the flow of the track greatly. Like the whole track is so fast paced with all the rail grinding, and this gliding section sticks out like a sore thumb with how slow it is. Number 9, Sky High Sunday. Why does this version of the track give me the impression that it was originally intended for Mario Kart World? Because holy damn, this track got one hell of a glow up. This track is actually now fun to drive on. Yippee! The original was just Excitebike 2.0, with the amount of boring tricking you did. Leave your hate comments down below on how I'm disrespecting the hell out of Excitebike Arena, I don't care. The amount of tricking is not much more than in the original, but it feels so much better. Like every trick you do on this version of the track has a purpose to it. unlike the original track when you just shake the controller and hope some tricks come out because it grants a speed boost. There are a lot more shortcuts on this game, like this shortcut where you drive on the wall, which is one of my favorites in the whole game. The color palette of this track also got a massive improvement, and it's honestly way more fitting in Mario Kart World than Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Number 8. Dry Bones Burnout. The redemption for Bone Dry Dunes is insane. This track is what Bone Dry Dunes should have been. And this track goes for a sort of Day of the Dead impression with its theming, as well as a lot of lava, which in this game you can actually sunk into. Unless you of course have a speed item. The lava in Mario Kart World overall I really like with how it works. But in this track it's used to full effect. Also, the amount of branching paths, which roughly take about the same time, is insane, which leads to the track having a lot of replayability. And honestly, this should be in anyone's top 10, bare minimum. Number 7. Dino Dino Jungle. There wasn't even any flaws in the original, and they still managed to improve it. As for the theming of this track, it goes for a sort of Jurassic Park theming, which I really love. And then for the gimmick of this track, the fact that the dinosaurs actually walk around on this track, cycling between different dinosaurs, is amazing, and which is what Faraway Oasis should have done with its animals. But as for this track, the amount of shortcuts are amazing. And like I said, the dinosaurs actually feel alive. This track got such a glow up and it didn't even have to do that much. Number 6. Airship Fortress. Again, they didn't even have to do that much, but they went even further beyond, and they give us something that we all wanted. A beautiful reimagination of Airship Fortress. The amount of shortcuts on this track are insane, and you've probably seen them around TikTok somewhere. This is probably the track most famous for shortcuts, aside from one track that we'll be talking about in a bit. But as for Airship Fortress, this track retains all of its glory and enhances it greatly. The part where you drive around the ship is amazing as always, and probably the only boring part is the part in the spiral tower, which I can accept because it builds up a lot of suspense, and it isn't exactly unfun to drive on by any means. It's just the only part that sticks out to me as being a bit boring. But overall they did an amazing job creating Airship Fortress, and I'm so happy that they did. Number 5. Shia Bazaar. Controversial take to put this above Dino Dino Jungle and Airship Fortress, I know, and you're probably noticing a trend here. The amount of shortcuts greatly enhanced the placement on the ranking. More specifically, shroomless shortcuts. It just makes me keep coming back to these tracks, and as well as seeing yourself improve on these tracks is such an amazing feeling it hurts. As for Shia Bazaar, the theming of this track is amazing. Whereas it was originally more like Shia Bazaar, this version of the track is based on Sarasa Land from Super Mario Land, which I think is such a genius move on Nintendo, which I really gotta applaud them for. This reimagined track is so good. Like, I didn't care that much for the original, but this version of the track just makes me care so much more. Number 4. Wario Stadium. Damn, the Flower Cup is on a roll. 2 tracks in the top 5 for being one of the beginning Grand Prix. It's insane. But damn, Wario Stadium got one hell of a glow up. But this time for real. It still feels like Wario Stadium, but again, the amount of shortcuts on here is insane. You basically don't drive on the track at all if you're taking the fastest route. Which, you can argue if that's a good thing, but it's so good on this track. And I can see this being a lot of people's favorites just because of how technical the track is. Number 3. Great Block Ruins. This is the track probably most famous for its shortcuts, like I said in the Airship Fortress. We would be coming back to this one. Because, holy damn, like I said, and I'm probably retreading this a lot, the shortcuts on this track are insane. But more so than on Mario Kart Stadium, because all of the mechanics of Mario Kart World are utilized here. The rail grinding, the tricking on random objects, the wall riding, it's all here and it feels amazing. Also, the theming is really interesting. A track being based off a question mark block is not something that was on my bingo list for this game. Number 2. Bowser's Castle. This has to be the best Bowser's Castle in the entire series. You can argue with me all you want, but it's the truth. Sorry to tell you that. The only reason it's probably up here is because of this section right here, You're just going so fast. It feels amazing to drive through, and the atmosphere is really intense, like you would expect from a Bowser's Castle track. The only thing I kind of miss here is like some sort of Bowser statue throwing you off the track or something, just to keep the theme rolling, you know. Like Mario Kart Wii had it, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe had it. Just keep the theming with the old Bowser statue throwing you off the track and stuff, and this track would have been number 1. I mean, maybe not. When I was playing this track, I would be sure this would be the best track in the game. But then I played... One, Rainbow Road. Could it be any other track than this one? And that might be recency bias, but this Rainbow Road gives you something unlike any other track. A complete experience. This Rainbow Road isn't that hard. It doesn't utilize any of the mechanics of Mario Kart World, but it still feels like a journey, in the same way that 3DS Rainbow Road does, which most people consider to be one of the best tracks in the franchise as well. But this track far exceeds that track in terms of visuals, in terms of layout, in terms of music, everything. When I was playing this track for the first time, my mouth literally was hanging over. I was drooling the entire time I was playing this track. The water section, the space station section, the final section where you drive back down to Earth. It's all so amazing. If you don't have your Rainbow Road anywhere in the top 3, your list is almost completely invalid.
5. Rainbow Road.
Hooey, that was a lot, wasn't it? To be honest, I'm expecting myself to disagree with most of these takes 2 years after this video. But I still put a lot of care into this list, and I'm hoping you agree. If you don't agree, leave a comment down below on which placement you disagree with, but please give it to alright. If you like this video, leave a like down below, a sub would be very appreciated, and see you all in the next one. Bye bye.